Good morning, everyone. I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Barrie Police Service Board of January the 18th, 2024. I apologize to those who may have been watching live, waiting for our meeting, for our delay this morning, but welcome everyone here present and those watching online. I'd like to begin our meeting with our land acknowledgement. In keeping with Indigenous protocol and building respectful relationships between Indigenous and non-Indigenous peoples in Canada, it is customary to acknowledge the traditional territories and ancestral lands of Indigenous peoples. We would like to acknowledge this sacred land on which the Barrie Simcoe Emergency Service Campus operates. It has been the site for human activity for 15,000 years. This land is the ancestral land of the Wendat and the Anishinaabe Nation. The treaty that was signed for this particular parcel of land is collectively referred to as the Williams Treaty. We are dedicated to honoring Indigenous peoples and culture. We also recognize the enduring presence of Indigenous peoples on this land and are committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and respect. Miigwech, thank you. We'll begin the meeting by releasing the chair for our elections of chair, vice chair, and subcommittees. I'll hand the chair over to our board administrator, Ms. Young. If you could lead us through that, please. Thank you.
Good morning. First, we are going to call for nominations for the position of chair for the year of 2024. Are there any nominations?
Thanks, Lynn. Appreciate it. I'd like to nominate Greg Ferguson to be chair.
And Greg, are you willing to stand for the year of 2024?
Yes.
Are there any further nominations? And all in favor? So the motion will be carried and Greg Ferguson will remain chair for the year of 2024. We are now going to call for nominations for the position of vice chair for 2024.
I'd like to nominate Robert Thompson.
Thank you. And Robert, are you willing to stand? Are there any further nominations? All in favor? And Deputy Mayor Thompson, you will be the vice chair for 2024. We do have one other nomination to do today. We're going to be doing the budget subcommittee, which yearly is done, and Chair Ferguson will remain on the budget subcommittee as the chair. So we're just looking for one member who would like to be nominated to be on the committee. And Lynn, are you looking to remain on the committee? Yes. Perfect. Any further nominations? Okay, so that nomination or that election is closed and we are looking for the policy and bylaw subcommittee now. Any nominations for members of the board?
I nominate Eric.
Perfect. And Eric, are you willing to remain?
Yes, I am. Thank you.
Perfect. And that motion will be carried as well. So we have, we can close now and I'll return to the chair.
Thanks very much, Sarah. A motion to approve today's agenda that was distributed in advance. Mr. Khan, any questions, comments, amendments to today's agenda? Seeing none, those in favor? Thank you. Any declaration of conflict of interest with respect to today's agenda items? Seeing none. Our minutes of December the 14th were distributed in advance. A motion to approve those minutes, please. Mayor Nuttall, Deputy Mayor Thompson, any questions, amendments, adjustments, etc. to our minutes of December the 14th? Seeing none, those in favor? Thank you. There were two items in today's consent agenda provided to the board in advance. One is staff acknowledgements and two are public complaints. Are any of those items that any member would like pulled? Any questions with respect to the consent agenda items submitted? Seeing none, a motion to receive those. Mayor Thompson, Mr. Chairman, all those in favor? Thank you. Chief, I think I'll hand it over to you first of all with respect to our statistical update. I know I speak for the board when I say that we always look with interest to see the data update, and I'll hand it over to you, please, sir.
Thank you, Chair. And you know full well and good that our commitment as an organization towards increasing transparency and to assist the public better understand what we do and why we do it. With me today, I have Madison Sharman. I also have Staff Sergeant Fitzgerald to answer any specific operational questions with regard to the data. I think it's important that we certainly explain the data itself, the data sets, but then understand what it looks like in a concrete format. Should there be any questions? And again, I welcome Madison when she's ready to roll here, but again, please, this is the presentation's there, but the majority of this time is allotted to questions should you have any.
Okay, good morning, everybody. So we're going to be doing our statistical update today. We've changed it to be triennial. So the nice thing about this time is it's our full 2023. So it's kind of a year in review. So our data is current as of December 31st, 2023, and this really is a group effort from the entire team here. We, as a evidence-based research and innovation unit, constantly monitor, collect, and analyze big data for years. So it is a group effort to get all of this information to you. So just as a reminder, we have a couple different measurements of police activity that we're going to talk about today. So we have our CAD-created events. Those are traditionally our calls for service. We have our crime counts. That's derived from our UCR data. So you can have one call for service, but you can have multiple crimes within that call for service. Then we have our crime harm. Now that harm score is derived from a weight given to us by Stats Canada that is connected to the UCR crime count. And then we have social disorder. Social disorder is actually connected to the blue, the CAD created events, and are often events where we see intersections of homelessness, mental health, and addictions, and are often non-criminal in nature, but do drive a lot of police call volume. So those are our 4 data lenses that we looked to. So just to talk about CAD created events quickly, they can come into our service and fall within a range of categories. We can have emergency, non-emergency, criminal, non-criminal, and then from there kind of intersections on each end. And so this just shows an example of the wide array of calls that come into the police service. Calls that then come in are prioritized based on need. So what we're looking at in terms of our 2023 data, about 0.04% are considered priority 0. That is our highest priority. And then we go into 31% is priority 1, which is considered urgent. And then we go less severe as we go down the scale here. So priority 2 is moderate at 15% of our call volume. Priority 3, routine or an alternative response, that's sitting at 26%. And then our priority 4, which is really our proactive. So we like to think of our officer initiated hotspots, traffic stops. That proactive driven work takes up about 28% of our calls. So again, just breaking it further to look at percentages across the year, we're usually give or take about 1 or 2% plus or minus. So we're just kind of seeing that trend continue in terms of the breakdown of our priority and what's considered emergency and non-emergency. So when we look at our calls for service or CAD created events, 2023 has been our highest year with 81,504 calls for service coming in. We've also added online reports. So online reports aren't part of the CAD created event numbers. So we popped this on top to show as well. Those are still police resources being used towards those 5,000 plus calls coming in online. So that's just showing an example of the general volume that's coming into the service. Not every call for service requires police to attend. So a lot of this is taken by our call takers, then triage and dispatch police accordingly. So when we ask what drives that volume, as you see, we've had about a 10,000 call for service increase since 2022. So when we talk about what drives that volume, one of the biggest challenges we're facing, and this is seen across a lot of other Ontario police services, is the volume of 911 call hangups. So this is taking up 31% of our call volume. Only 0.28% of them are reportable, which we can say considers or requires any kind of police interaction or police intervention. So many of them are accidental calls, pocket dials, those kinds of things. So we just do remind the public, if you do accidentally call 911, please stay on the line, because our call takers will ultimately have to open an investigation to ensure that there is no trouble, and that's some extra resources. So if you stay on the line, make sure everything's okay with our call takers. It just helps us resolve that a little quicker. And let's talk about some of the other voluminous calls that we're seeing. So across that 10,000, we're actually seeing equal pockets in some of our most frequent calls. So it is really just a true volume increase. It's not a spike in a certain call or our biggest fear, kind of a data issue. It really is just a true increase in volume. So with 911 hangups removed, what we're seeing, police assistance being a large driver, traffic stops again being proactive, motor vehicle collisions, unwanted person calls, community service, which is again proactive, ambulance assist, traffic complaints, suspicious person, domestic dispute, and noise complaint. When we look at our CAD reporting methods, we're seeing, again, when we look at that 10,000 call increase, that's distributed across our call methods. So we're seeing increases in both non-emergency, 911 call, and officer-generated calls for service. We're also excited to see an increased adoption in our online reporting. Of those online reporting types. So we are seeing an increase. We're opening the scope of what can be reported online, which can help explain higher adoption. But what we see the most is thefts, frauds, property damage, any kind of suspicious circumstance, theft of gas, etc. So we're able to push this to an alternative unit, which then leaves these calls away from the front line, which allows them to answer some of those higher priority, more emergency calls for service. Now, going back to our CAD, remember we talked about we have different measurements. So although these are volume drivers and very frequent calls we see, police assistance is very much a social disorder indicator, as is unwanted person, ambulance assist, and suspicious person. So we are working with our community partners to develop alternate response options that can better address some of these concerns that are coming up. Often these calls are non-criminal in nature, and people just need to be connected to services. So we're working on projects that touch on some of those concerns. Now we're going to look at our harm metric. So our harm metric comes from Stats Canada. It looks at the average sentencing as well as incarceration rates in days. So that's what these numbers are looking at. That's how we get the weight. Police are not involved in the decision making of what is seen as more severe than others. This all comes from our courts, and we're just able to then apply this to provide a different lens to our data. I did want to let the public and the board know there will be a new index that we're going to start using in 2024. So it gets updated every 5 years. It essentially auto-corrects for societal changes in the courts, and the new one was released. And so starting January 1st, 2024, we're going to apply that index. So that means it will also go retroactively. We'll switch our old data to this. So everything will be apples to apples. But perhaps next time we do this presentation, I know murder in the first degree went up to 8,000 something. So some of the weights will be slightly different. But I'll remind everybody with it. So again, the benefit of using a harm lens. Most police services look at counts only. And this assumes that all crime is equal. However, we know that that is not the case. Crimes are impact victims and community differently depending on the severity. So through a traditional count lens, we're looking at a 1-to-1 ratio. However, when we apply a harm lens, we're able to better allocate resources based on the severity of the crime type that's happening. So here it shows the difference between theft under, 10 theft unders being 373, and 10 aggravated assaults being about 5,000. Based on research, we've then further divided up the Canadian Crime Severity Index into 3 categories. We have our community reported harm. This we consider anything with a person victim, things that are called into the police where a person victim is involved. Then we have our proactively detected. These are things that can be influenced by police resources. So we often see things like forces to combat drugs or various things like that. So a lot of those kind of calls for service and charges fall under proactive. And then commercially detected, those are things that can be swayed based on private resources, such as loss prevention officers. So we categorize things like our shoplifts in our commercially detected harm. I do want to make a mention here, since we are the first service to operationalize this in Canada, we improve as we go. So something that we noticed as a team is that currently possession of weapons was being considered community reported harm. And the more we thought about that, we realized that we could do that better. So instead, we're looking at certain possession of weapons charges being categorized as proactive and some categorized as harm. So the idea here is if a weapon is used in the commission of an offense, it is still harmful. It's considered community reported harm. However, in times such as proactive traffic stops, when weapons are found in vehicles, that's then considered proactive. It is the officer work that then detected to that. It wasn't somebody calling in based on being victim to an assault with a weapon. So we have added that delineation, and you'll see that reflected in our proactive harm categories, how that now has changed a little bit. So when we look at harm trends by type, we have the averages categorized there. Of course, community reported harm making up the most. It is the most voluminous, but proportionately, when you look at the harm scores, they are the most harmful, hence why it takes up the biggest proportion of harm. So when we look at these total scores, I do want to remind everybody that this also includes proactive and commercial. So this is what we're seeing as a total trend of harm year over year. I think an important lens is to simply isolate community reported harm as well. So this is harm that is called into the police service with person victims. So what we're seeing here is about a 25,000 increase score. I don't want that to cause any panic. Remember, a single murder with one perpetrator is a score of almost 8,000. So let's just put that into context a little bit. So it is up. This is citywide. We do have a increase in harm. Now, as you see, it is still in line with our maximums and our minimums. So it's not off the charts. However, it is something we want to look into. So we know what these events are. Very few crimes and calls for service have driven this harm up. Sergeant Fitzgerald is here to talk about any of the operational impacts, but in these cases, suspects have been charged, arrested. We are very much aware, so I will say that. So we know what's driving that up. When we look at our harm drivers, so what is driving that score? Fraud is consistently our number one. We see that both as a large harm score, but also quite voluminous, right? So it does have a high harm score, but also has over 700 occurrences of that happening. Then we have break and enter, robbery. Robbery is an example of something that is high harm, but lower in volume. So it's on our top harm drivers, but there was only 70 instances of that happening in 2023. Sexual assault level 1, theft, and assault level 2, so with a weapon or bodily harm. So we have that as our harm drivers within the city. Then when we look at our proactive, again, this is going to look different. So now that we've categorized possessions of weapons as proactive, it's actually one of our largest proactive drivers. So that is something that our officers are often finding, seeking, and able to track down. Then we have bail violations, breaches of probation, and other possession-related harms. And then within the community reported, these again remain very, very consistent simply because there's only 3 of them that fall under this category. But the theft under, so shoplifting, taking up a bulk of this, again, understanding that these numbers can be influenced depending on private resources. This is why we chunk them out of our community reported harm. I want to talk about our harm concentration. So harm is extremely concentrated in our city, and this is consistent with other research findings. So this speaks to the concentration of people and locations. So within the city of Barrie, 20% of that community reported, that victim-based harm, occurred at 0.04% of addresses in the city in 2023. So like I mentioned, we know what happened and we know where they are, and we're actively able to monitor those areas appropriately. Similarly, 22 people committed 20% of community reported harm in the city of Barrie. So again, a high percentage is due to a small volume of people who we are aware of and we know what they're doing. So I wanted to just walk through a couple of our maps in terms of what happened month over month. So we're here seeing that in February, we did have an extremely high harm event happen. Again, we are aware, but hence the very tall tower here in February that we see. Then as we go through, we see that harm continues to move around the city. And again, when we see that high harm, it's not a lot of harm instances. It's usually one harmful event that happened in that month that we are aware of. So here, once we start hitting the later end of the year is when, for the first time, we started to see harm clustering downtown and have added a harm spot downtown into our checks accordingly. But it wasn't until this time period that we really saw a harmful event that brought our attention there. And again, I do just want to remind everybody, these harm scores sound a little scary. They're quite large, but when you do look at the map, you see that it's a few instances that drive this harm, and we're very aware of where it's happening, when it's happening. I wanted to compare last year to this year to see the difference between our harm. So we actually are up by about 6% in our harm this trimester. There's not a quarter, but this period, we'll say, compared to last year. But you do see the concentration has significantly changed. So last year it was a little bit more spread out, and like I said, this is the first time we've seen that harm cluster downtown, and we're quite aware of where it's going. And Sergeant Fitzgerald's team is the one looking after that. And this is always my favorite one, again, comparing social disorder volume to harm. So again, a lot of police services direct resources based on this far side map that all police calls. That paints a very different picture than the data that we're using in terms of our harm. So all calls are still important, but different resources are required for different events. And so by using this harm metric, we're able to see, is this a high harm team issue we're sending out? Is this a community engagement team? Or is this maybe a partnership team with social service agencies? So it really just helps us guide our resources better when we use these metrics. I do want to give a quick harm spot update. Our harm spots are looking good. We did see that as our police officer checks decreased, some of our harm spots went up. So we auto-corrected, and we're starting to see our police checks increase, and that those harm spots are coming back down. Again, those harm spots are remaining significantly lower than their pre or their baseline harm. And we've been excited to say, except for this one area we've added downtown, we continuously see that no other spots are bringing themselves into that threshold of harm that they need to be re-added. Everything is kind of staying below those thresholds and those baselines from where we started. I'll give a quick traffic spot update. So we announced to the board last year that we were looking at a new traffic hotspot initiative. So we have these 9, I believe, areas identified by our crime analyst where we see higher levels of personal injury and more serious collisions. So we've been doing proactive work in these areas, and we're excited to say we are seeing decreases to the yellow being, since we started our checks at the peak of August when they really started to be deployed, we're continuously, in comparison to the same time last year, seeing lower collisions and injuries in those areas. So we're happy to see that. And then lastly, I just wanted to shout our service out a little bit here. So we hosted an evidence-based policing conference in December of 2023. And we had over 25 organizations attend, and our board chair was there for a little bit. He got voluntold to introduce a day. And we have had a lot of interaction with police services wanting to measure activity the way we do. A lot of them asking how we communicate this to our public and our board. And we really see ourselves as leaders in this space. So we're excited to see a lot of other police services are interested in what we're doing and asking us how they can do the same. But other than that, that is our stats update.
Excellent presentation. Questions, I see Mayor Nuttall, you first, and then Deputy Mayor Thompson. Then Lynn, then Aaron. I'll go last.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I actually just have one question. There was a slide you were showing some of the high harm across the city, and I saw there was, it looked like something in the south end, in a place that I couldn't identify, and I'm just wondering where that is. It's back, I think, one more, you know. This one right here. On the left hand, or on the community reported harm at the bottom, southern part of the city there. There's a, looks like either an incident or some incidents there. Where is that?
I don't think we can speak to specific locations, but I can pass that to sort of Fitzgerald or Chief.
Sorry, off the top of my head, I can't say the specific incident with location, but given the height of the tower and looking at the to the left, the actual scoring, it's not astronomically high. So I'm just trying to think in comparison. But that would, in terms of location, we can revisit that and find that.
I guess what, you know, there's a synagogue in that area. And that's actually my concern. Is there 8 related incidents that are occurring that we need to deal with?
Thank you. So I can assure you that that's not the case for that specific incident. So yes, and I apologize, it was more specific, and but we will get the specific details. No, this would be the crime or crimes, because there could be multiple crimes within an incident which would drive us 4 hours.
Thank you.
And I think staff sergeant.
It was the traffic incident where 3 individuals were hit, and the female just went through the whole process.
Mayor Thompson.
Thanks, Chair. On that map, on the all call volume, I was wondering if it's interactive with our community. Like, is this on your website? And are they able to zoom in on locations, not specific addresses, but like, that looks very blurry, like a QR code almost to the point, but like if I was at home, could I zoom in to kind of a more general area? Because right now I'm looking at that and Ward 5's the safest place. There's that big dark spot with no.
That's a great question. So remember, that's volume 2. So you could have a lot of non-criminal, non-severe calls for service within an area that could be turning it red in that map specifically. So that's not necessarily an indicator of harm or criminal activity. But what I can say is that is a great question. That's something we're working on building in the future. Right now, we do have a crime map on our website. However, it is not in this software technology, nor is it zoomable to the point where you can see addresses, because we do want to make sure we keep it high level enough to protect privacy. But that is something as a unit we're looking at deploying, is more of an interactive mapping software. We've seen it in other services, so that is something we're looking to do in the future. Yeah.
Another question, Pointer. On the slide that showed fraud, really high. And I was wondering if that's associated like human hours too, because fraud is normally a very investigative heavy thing. Or are we noticing a lot of resources for that? And I have only one more question, you can answer them both separately. That I think it was in October of last year, or maybe even a little bit earlier, we realized the downtown as the hotspot, and I was just wondering if you could say what were some of the crimes and if there's any evidence of why they were occurring, and how is the program working with the deployment of the hotspot team and stuff. They're the only last two questions I had.
Okay, so question one with respect to fraud, it really comes down to the UCR and the compounding number of incidents that occur. Fraud is typically one of those ones where a person may commit fraud 20, 30, 40 offensive times, and then they get charged, right? And then you take each offense that has the numerical value, you add those up, and it gives you quite a high score. To be quite honest, it's always been one that I've been intrigued by, because we're talking about incarcerated time as well, what gives us that number. So it's showing that fraud, which most people would say your money's insured, et cetera, to a certain extent. Why are so many people being incarcerated for that length of time? But it really has to do more with, in my opinion, that frauds are a very intensive investigation. When you get into one, you often find multiple other victims. So then when you compound those victims and they all receive the charge, or the individual has 10 victims and 10 times the UCR has been coded, it all gets compounded and gives you that bigger number. So that's my opinion on the fraud. With respect to the downtown, we did a 6 weeks project in the downtown core using the high harm team and the engagement team. And we did, one of the initiatives we did was the See It and Seize It. That was very successful. We had over 50 seizures of open air drug use as well as alcohol in the downtown core. Part of that too, though, was educating individuals that are marginalized that were using to use safely, use in a buddy group, use in an area where people know you are. Some of the concerns from the community partners were that overdoses were going to go up because they were being pushed out into areas where they weren't seen. I can report that overdoses actually stayed the same or went down week to week. And that's from the Simcoe County report that I also received. So that was good. And in relation to that, the one hotspot was downtown. So we had a larger police presence while we were doing the project, as well as uniform patrol in the hotspot. And we did have a decrease of harm in the downtown core. In 2023, the reason that went up, it was associated essentially to two incidents. One was a retaliation for a robbery, assault, bodily harm that happened the year prior. The individual got out of custody. They saw the individual downtown, and a beating ensued. And in that case, there was 4 accused to 1 victim. So each of the 4 offenders received all the charges. So it compounded and went up. And in the other case, a gentleman was breaking up with his wife, went downtown, enjoyed himself too much, and lipped off to the wrong individual, who then fight ensued, and ABH was the charge in that as well. So those 2 incidents were really the main driver of the harm score in the downtown core going up. There was some other calls for service, and hence why we picked that certain location.
If I can jump in there as well, sure. And so here is the challenge, and we do want to communicate this to the board and to the public. And so when you have an incident and there are 4 accused, it's a bad incident because there's a victim, but it looks disproportionately bad because 4 people, and that is how we measure the actual crime. It's not just 4 single, it's the actual harm scores compound. Also, the challenge here is when we talk about fraud, it's not that person A goes to person B's house and commits a fraud there. This is happening on the internet. It's actually where it's called in. And so the type of victimization there is a little more challenging in today's world with respect to them when you look at the harm score compounding. But where that harm is actually occurring and where that the challenges in terms of identifying that crime, the victim is in where they call it in, but did the actual crime occur there? It gets a little gray. So when we look at the harm score there, it's the sheer volume of that one that is the drivers.
Anything else from there? Ms. Strong, I think you were next then. Mr. Strong.
Thank you. I think the chief actually just answered one of my questions in relation to the fraud numbers around where the fraud is actually occurring. So I appreciate that response, because that was a concern that I had as well, that you can be anywhere and victimize somebody in Barrie through fraud in this day and age. But just adding to that, what is the difference though in the operating, how our police are actually investigating or what they're doing based on those different types of frauds? Like, I'm assuming they have a different operational response. If there's somebody committing fraud online from a place that's away, compared to somebody who may be like living in Barrie and committing fraud in Barrie. So how do we determine that, and then how are we responding to that?
Thank you. So for the purposes of the investigation, it really is not that fraud is a fraud, but there's always a paper trail, because at some point there is or whether it be electronic or actual physical paper, there's and limitations to that. There still may be an officer attending in Barrie with respect to, the individuals, the suspect is in with the purpose of then furthering that investigation. But obviously the challenges are when it's global in today's world, as a large number of them will be, over electronics, that becomes far more challenging. We do not obviously send people across the globe to investigate frauds, especially when they're a number of those are fraud under 5,000, which is, again, not to reduce the victimization here of the people who value their money, but it's just in terms of across the entire organization and across the entire community, smaller amounts of fraud that are involved there. It's just with the limited resources, you can target appropriately. The fact of the matter is, it's more of a preventative type approach we take with the investigation. The investigation, though, does happen as much as possible with respect to when it does occur, and that may be submission through online, but also through an officer attending as well. But again, a report's generated, and as much as that can be done is done.
And just to touch further on that operationally, one of the frauds we experienced last year was an individual illegal rooming houses putting on Kijiji and that, hey, I have this room for rent, come meet us there, and it's completely fraudulent. The person just made up. So operationally, we went out and we did a covert operation. We arrested that individual, and he was preying essentially on international students in that one, and was someone known to us. When we're talking about the digital frauds or bank frauds and that, it's foreign writing production orders, etc. And you got to follow the trail. Often it takes you internationally, and then it becomes a whole nother ball game. But if it's something operationally that occurs in town, then the high harm team will go out and do something. Otherwise, if it's bank fraud in that, our fraud unit does operationalize and investigate those.
You have a quick note about fraud from the data perspective. Fraud is very broad in scope. So that could be, I left my wallet in the Walmart shopping cart and somebody took it. That could be fraud, marketplace, Facebook marketplace scams, these kinds of things. And also because it's reported online, we're seeing increased online reports. So it's easier to report. So potentially more people are reporting these incidents happening. Things that are of lower threshold that may not have been reported before because they didn't feel comfortable calling. So we are potentially seeing a higher volume of fraud reports, which have the same score, which may some be less required for investigative resources than others. So there is, from the data side too, it's a pretty large scope of what fraud can encounter.
My other question relates to the 911 hangups. And every time we get this report, we hear about the 911 hangup. It's a huge problem. And I'm just wondering, is there anything that the board can do? Like, can we take any sort of advocacy action to other levels of government or to something to try to find a way to reduce the number of 911 hangups that we have? Like, this is not just our problem in Barrie. This is a problem across the province, across the country, and like in the tech space, innovation, there are a lot of really smart people out there. So like, Could somebody solve this problem and could we help to get on that
Absolutely.
track?
Yes, so a lot of the times too, as we see increased safety measures on smartphones, which makes it easier to call 911, more accessible. Also, you're seeing an increase in accidental dials. So us as a unit and working with our corporate communications have discussed bringing the issue to the Ontario Association of Chiefs of Police. Because it is something seen throughout Ontario and an issue seen by multiple services. So bringing it to a higher body to start advocating or coming up with solutions to this resource draining issue.
Just as a quick follow-up, could I then just ask that maybe at a future board meeting, we get a report that would provide us some options on how we can do some advocacy on trying to solve this problem?
Absolutely. Member Strong. And I just, to that point though, with respect to advocating, and I've actually seen in somewhere in my news feed where they were looking at fining individuals who misused it. You get into that balance where you want that accessibility of 911 and in each time it's dialed, we hope that and yes, it's using resources. We generally hope it is a misdial versus actual need for assistance, which is an indicator of greater harm. But we just want to make sure that we're not penalizing to a point where we make it a greater problem than it is in terms of tracking the individuals down. We'd rather them stay on the line. We'd rather them, because if we can resolve them faster, yes, it's work. But if all of a sudden there's a punitive measure to it and there's attempts to avoid it, it may increase our work down the road. So I'm not going to stay there. No, and I appreciate, but it's again, and we've seen this year over year increase, and this is not just us, it's everyone. It's just, it's a frustrating problem. And it is, there is a tech solution to some degree, but at the same time, we want that ease of, if I need emergency services, I need whoever, or we want our community to be able to access them in need. But how to reduce errors, I'm not sure. So, but we will absolutely, a report will be prepared so we can explore options.
Anything else? Come on, please.
Thank you, Chair. Two quick questions and quick comment, by the way. Fantastic presentation. Thank you. It's clear why you're getting the accolades as a service for and to your team. Excellent work. First question on this slide here real quick. Please just clarify if there is an incident, even if it was a singular perpetrator, lack of a better word, if there was a break-in that included theft, would both scores be added? Okay.
Yeah, so that's why when we look at our, we have a criminal event, let's say it's considered a break and enter. But then within that criminal event, we have multiple UCR codes, which are our crime counts. So it would have been coded a break and enter, a theft, a mischief, these kinds of things. Those are all cumulatively accounted for in our measurements. So yeah, so it could technically double count single events, but it's a better picture of the harm.
Perfect. Just wanted that clarification. Thank you for that. The second question is around forecasting. A lot of the data that you're collecting, we're looking at what has happened to better understand it, to better prepare on how to respond.
Yep.
We've very recently got 3 examples. I hope I'm allowed to speak to them. I think I am. They're in public around the budget request and what's included within it, which was just last night. We don't know where that's going to be. We'll find out in a couple of weeks. But there's some taking into account in that request. We've recently expressed the services need to move towards a deployable complement regarding, because your report is talking about increased events and increased harm counts collectively. So that's a response to it. And then you've mentioned the recent deployment of the alternative response or virtual attending. With all of those things in mind, that's the services response to, given the evidence on how to better address and make use of the scarce resources that we do have. My question's around forecasting. What else? Because in the event that, based on the data that you have so far, and you see a trend towards the fact that all of your percentages, your earlier slide regarding the percentages of what types of crime or what types of harm added up to more than 100%. let's say that they added up to more than 100% because of our capacity and our reduced deployability. What are you working towards in terms of modeling and forecasting?
Yeah, that's a great question. So I will say as a service and as a unit, we are very cautious about forecasting in police data around the predictive policing. There's a lot of ethical concerns that we need to consider. Also, a lot of our high harm events are anomalies in the sense that even based on past data, that wouldn't have been predicted. So we are working on finding a balance between what is an ethical way for us to, look forward from our data, but in a way that doesn't unfairly target, but also considering that it may miss or not be able to forecast based on kind of our trends. So that is a great question. And that is something as a service, and such an innovative service, we're trying to figure out how we move forward with that lens, but also considering some of the other implications around the predictive and policing. So.
And then just a couple of things from my side operationally. Obviously, we're starting to get more data. As I see, like when we shifted to the downtown core, I know now next year, the time frame in which in the season that we started to see a trend up. Now, if I do an intervention at that time, can we compare those years and say, okay, at this time of year, we need to have a bigger footprint in the downtown core. So that's something that I will look at doing. It was also just successful in getting a bail apprehension and warrant grant. We got the maximum money. We are allowed to talk about it. It just came public. So with that, we are going person-based with the high harm team. We combine the team to one team of 6, and we will be going after the power of few offenders in hopes that by keeping tabs on them, GPS monitored. We also entered into an agreement with Solicitor General's office for GPS ankle monitoring usage. Our community was Port area was one of the lower users in all of Ontario. And in 2022, there was only about 300 accused with a monitor on. In 2023, there was 2,200. And we anticipate the usage going up due to what's going on in the court system. So we've entered in that agreement. We've already used it twice. It's been great for our unit. We've gone to one team of 6 on a different schedule where we're out more at night at the times of curfew or house arrest. And those are the individuals that they'll be doing compliance checks on that. So we are doing a lot of things to attempt to combat the harm score. And just to touch on that, like 50,000, I know sounds scary, but if you have one homicide and you have 3 offenders involved in that homicide, there's over 2,600, there are 26,000, right? Again, I'm not minimizing it, but we can explain it off. In the sense of it, because we are a safe city, it takes 1-2 events with multiple accused and then it can go up. But now we're in week 2 of the new deployment with a high harm team, and we are addressing those individuals that are from our power of few list or are wanted by, say, the crimes against people, and we're actually tracking the data now. Their harm score for the past 365 days that we deal with them, and from 2018 when we have our data, and we're cumulatively measuring if we have an impact on the harm in our community. That's Brandon.
Any other questions for the team? Mine was answered through Ms. Johns about 911. When you spend time in the communications, you will see the resources that it costs our service and all services with respect to dealing with 911 calls. So it is a full problem, and I do look forward to hearing back from the chief and what is being done either with respect to our service and or across the province or nationally to deal with the problem. It's a major drain of resources dealing with those calls. So I thank you for that, Mr. And I, Chief, just to thank the entire team for the update. And I guess we got to wait 4 months for the next one now, being the tribe rather than the quarter, that we look forward to. And thank you for your continued efforts to make a difference. We appreciate it. And I'll throw it back to you, please, Chief, for your monthly update to the board and to the community. Chief Jonathan.
Thank you, Board Chair, and thank you for the opportunity to highlight a few events and initiatives that have occurred since our last board meeting. Wait till our, I think she comes up here. Excellent. Yes, it's there we go. Okay, so on December 14th, our service participated in the spirit of giving by delivering a collection of donations to the annual Toy Mountain Drive. Through the generous support of many community members, the Mountain of Toys received directly supported families struggling in our area to make ends meet. These donations go beyond the material value of the toys. They symbolize the community's compassion and commitment to supporting one another, especially during times of need. I did like a note from our one of our favorites there was some little girl or boy is going to be happily driving along in a little Battenberg motorcycle. So we hope they enjoy. On December 15th, Auxiliary May Pankhurst and Special Constable Shalyn Caladine attended McDonald's on Bayfield Street for their grand reopening. No surprise, once again, when we talk about the concentration of crime, the Hamburglar was caught attempting to hoard all the hamburgers, but promptly realized the significance of the day for the restaurant owner, staff, and local families who received support from the Ronald McDonald House Charities. The success of our mitten tree continued into 2023, with our generous community members donating hundreds of mittens, scarves, and hats. On December 20th, these items were delivered to several organizations across our community to those in need just before the onset of winter and weather in our city. And as you can appreciate the climate outside right now, they're well needed. I was happy to attend the Malayali Association Holiday Bash held at the South Shore Center on December 23rd. Once there, the evening was spent celebrating Christmas and ringing in the new year through lively music and a warm sense of community. And a thank you to the Bama Association for the invite. This city continues to grow, and we become richer with our diversity and the celebration of that. On December 18th, the Barrie Police leadership team served a traditional turkey dinner to express gratitude and appreciation for the hard work and dedication of our members throughout the year. When people eat together, it's not just about the food. It's a chance to build connections, providing us with the opportunity to connect on a more personal level. To all of our sworn and civilian members, thank you. Your efforts are truly appreciated. Pictures on the left capture the brisk walk I had with along our beautiful waterfront with our recruits back in December. You know, a couple of them were in shorts. Balmy day, beautiful. But on January 5th, I, along with MP Doug Shipley, Solicitor General Michael Kersner, Minister Andrea Kanjan, board members Ferguson Strawn, Chair, and the numerous family members of our recruits gathered for our recruits graduation ceremony. The police badge ceremony holds immense significance as it marks the formal induction of new officers into the policing community. This event not only symbolizes the culmination of rigorous training, but also signifies the beginning of a new chapter in the officers' professional lives. The addition of these 4 new officers makes our community better, taking us a step closer to a safer and more vibrant place for everyone. Michael, Prabat, Nav, and Connor, congratulations once again, and be safe. The OHL Big Ticket for Special Olympics took place on January 4th with our very own Nick Cunningham dropping the puck to start the game between the Barrie Colts hockey game against Sarnia Sting. It's just a small reminder that Barrie Polar Plunge registration is now open, so consider taking the icy plunge board or supporting a plunger brave enough to participate. This event will raise money for the Special Olympics Ontario, and 100% of the funds will directly benefit Special Olympics Ontario athletes. Our traffic unit conducted several ride events this season and will be conducting more in the upcoming months. The ride events resulted in over 5,000 vehicle checks, 177 approved screening device tests being administered, 8 3-day suspensions being issued, 9 persons being charged with criminal impaired related offenses, 27 Highway Traffic Act offenses, and 10 other criminal code charges being laid. While these statistics may not encompass all impaired driving charges laid by our frontline members during the holiday season, they do underscore the proactive efforts of our traffic unit, their effectiveness in removing impaired drivers from our roads, is a crucial measure to ensure the safety of all individuals. On January 11th, I attended the announcement at the Durham Regional Police Service Education and Training Building, where Solicitor General Michael Kersner shared important updates. Through the bail compliance and warrant apprehension grant, the province of Ontario has committed 24 million over 3 years to support police services throughout the province. This funding aims to mitigate the risk posed by serious and violent offenders who may commit crimes while out on bail or under community supervision. The allocation includes support for 17 municipal services, 4 Indigenous police services, and 12 OPP detachments. I'm delighted to announce that the Barrie Police Service is set to receive 1.2 million over the next 3 years. This funding will be directed towards providing our officers with the necessary tools and resources, enabling them to establish dedicated bail compliance and warrant apprehension teams. These teams will actively monitor and track down high-risk offenders, while also creating bail support teams to identify public safety considerations and enhance bail packages during hearings. Furthermore, our service will invest in technology to support the provincial bail compliance dashboard. This tool will enable us to monitor high-risk offenders in our community using the most accurate and up-to-date data available. This initiative marks a significant step towards enhancing public safety and law enforcement capabilities within our jurisdiction. Some of our investigations. On January 3rd, a Barrie Police vehicle equipped with the state-of-the-art automated license plate reader technology alerted the operator that a nearby motor vehicle had just passed it with unauthorized license plates. The investigating officer attempted to conduct a traffic stop. However, the vehicle initially failed to pull over. Once stopped, the investigation led to a quantity of suspected cocaine being located, with all 3 occupants being arrested and charged jointly with possession of a controlled substance, cocaine, and possession for the purposes of trafficking. The driver, a 36-year-old female from Barrie, was also charged with flight from police. The 2 male passengers, both from Barrie, faced joint charges for unauthorized possession of a weapon. The 36-year-old male was additionally charged with the breach of probation, and the 37-year-old male was charged with failed to comply with probation order. Using the LPR by continuously scanning license plates makes it more difficult for suspended drivers, drivers of stolen cars, and other vehicles with plates in poor standing to drive undetected. Under optimal conditions, the ALPR system is capable of scanning thousands of license plates per hour. On January 7th, the Barrie Police Service received a report about an incident on Highway 400 involving a small car and pickup truck. The car made a sudden move, causing the pickup driver to brake abruptly to avoid a collision. Both vehicles then exited the highway at Bayfield Street, where a second incident occurred on the off-ramp. The driver of the car reversed, nearly hitting the pickup truck driver. The road rage continued as both vehicles entered a parking lot at Bayfield and Grove Streets. The pickup driver was forcibly removed from his truck, assaulted, and there was an attempt to steal the truck. However, the attempt failed, and the blue car sped away westbound on Grove Street. Police later spotted and stopped the vehicle on Toronto Street. As police were dealing with the driver and his passenger, both ran from the vehicle, and a short foot chase ensued. Both males were taken into custody, and significant quantities of suspected fentanyl and cocaine were seized. While arresting the passenger, a fully loaded firearm was also located. The driver, a 26-year-old from Barrie, and a passenger, a 21-year-old male from Toronto, have been jointly charged with mischief, uttering threats, assault, attempted robbery, possession of cocaine, fentanyl, possession for the purposes of tracking both of those substances. The driver is also facing charges of dangerous operation and resist peace officer, while the passenger is facing a slew of weapons-related charges. Both men were held for a bail hearing that occurred late yesterday and since been remanded into custody. Chair, that concludes my update to the board, pending any questions.
Thank you very much, Chief Johnson. Questions from the board for the chief? Seeing none, just a comment from the chair. I haven't polled everybody, but I think Ms. Strong would like to join you in the polar plunge this year on behalf of the board.
Thank you, Chair. So noted. We'll add her to the list.
Yeah.
Thank you, Member Strong. That's strong, very strong.
Very strong. Thanks again, Chief, for the update. Our next meeting will be February 2022, 2024, obviously. And just before I adjourn, I did, in haste, forget to acknowledge our representative from Solgen, Solicitor General's office. Tina, she's our advisor and our contact, and we welcome you here today and thank you for taking the time to join us. We appreciate it. A motion to adjourn. Thank you.